Paperwork, an important part of your job. But it was also the safest. You were sitting in your office cubicle in the police department, signing papers, stamping forms, and making little crosses in the right squares. Occasionally, you filled out reports, edited them, or corrected spelling errors. While frowned upon, you were glad this was your job. You weren't risking any societal pushback by arresting a person with a mutation quirk, and you were completely safe from any marauding villain. That was, until your boss, Commissioner Hayato, left his personal office with a deep scowl, facing you and your colleagues. He coughed loudly to get everyone's attention. "We have just received a call from our boys at the Camino Ward Mall. A mutant went on a rampage. He, didn't survive the arrest." A cold shower washed over you. "Worst of all, a pro-hero caused a lot of collateral damage. I don't say this lightly, but there are a lot of things that need filling and filing if we don't want a complete meltdown in the media and a reduction in our budget." Overtime was the only word floating around in your head. "Do your best. We don't want a repeat of the Stain situation." Hayato scoffed. "Deifying a criminal. What's wrong with this country? Oh, this is Japan and not America." After these words, the commissioner retreated back into his office. The man was hard-working, and you knew he'd only leave after everyone else already had. Mere seconds after, the phones in the department blew up. Orders were shouted, and the noises of flying papers filled the room. It was an orderly chaos. Something you had went through many times. But today really was a bad timing. It was the anniversary of your wedding to the pro-hero, Red Riot. You two had made plans. He pulled a few strings to organize a private party, just you and him, in a prestigious sushi restaurant run by the culinary hero Kitchen Nightmare. You sighed. Why did it have to be a mutation quirk user? That alone doubled the paperwork. Kirishima sighed and leaned into the leather couch inside his study. He had just called off the arranged private event after you called him. Dealing with the enraged yet understanding chef hero was one thing. The other was that an occasion like this had been ruined by outside means. Ichiro showed only the greatest generosity towards you, and any failing in your marriage he made himself responsible for, be it you being a little upset during your time of the month, or that one time he forgot to buy you flowers before a date. You weren't even upset at him for it, which led to both of you apologizing profusely to each other. You apologized for not being upset, and him for being, as he put it, just like Bakugo. And how did he turn this disaster on himself? Well, he made himself believe that him not taking part in the battle with the villain made things escalate this way, ignoring that Kirishima didn't even knew this happened up until you called 10 minutes ago. The man played around with his wedding ring until an idea came to him. He got up and left his study. If you couldn't enjoy the fine dining he had planned, you could at least enjoy a meal cooked with heart. That was something meaningful, right? He had to admit, even after your 5-year-long relationship and your 1 year of being married, he still only had somewhat shallow grasp on romance. All he knew came from video games and movies, which meant that gifts and compliments were all he was capable and confident enough in doing. Too bad, he sucked at cooking. It was 4 a.m., the sun already rising from the horizon, when you opened the door to your home. It was a decently sized apartment inside of a luxurious complex. It even had a pool on the roof. Essentially, your apartment consisted of one really big living room with every other part attached to it. A study, a kitchen, a bathroom, and 2 bedrooms. Since one had gone unused, you had turned it into a pet room, which meant it was covered with a thin layer of straw, a few pee-pee boxes, and 2 small tubs of dry food for 3 very, very happy little bunnies. You walked on wobbly legs, too tired to walk properly. Your eyes had problems staying focused, too much staring on letters and numbers. How you managed to not crash your car during your drive home was a miracle. Strange. The lights in the living room were on. You rubbed over your face, finally able to process information. The living room was freshly cleaned. Yawning, you stumbled towards your bedroom, when suddenly you heard a pot crash. You blinked in confusion, forcing your brain to work through the information you were receiving. Slowly you began to approach the kitchen. The door was open, and you peeked inside. Your husband was hunched over the kitchen table, snoring loudly. Looking over the chaos he left behind, including a small pot filled with a red sauce lying on the ground right next to Kirishima's hovering hand. He must have been holding it before he passed out and dropped it in his sleep. The kitchen itself was dirty. Cut up vegetable pieces, spilled sauce, and burned things stuck inside pans. Then you noticed the big baking sheet in front of the sleeping man. Cautiously you approached. On the sheet was a perfectly looking lasagna. Knowing full well the lack of culinary ability of Ejiro, you poked the dish lightly, and then sucked off the sauce from your finger. It was spicy. Too spicy. You must have mistaken the paprika powder with the chili powder. You smirked and exhaled sharply. You love this man. At least it wasn't poison. Or, well, you couldn't tell if it was poisonous. Clearly a step down from the planned sushi, but, come on. He made it himself. With heart. And you had a hard time already, you thought. Resigning yourself to your fate, you grabbed a knife, cut out a square of the noodle dish before sitting down at the table in front of your husband. Quietly you chowed down. The noodle plates were overcooked, the sauce too runny, and the meat very dry. But you had to admit, it was the best dish he ever made. If the kitchen wasn't in its poor state, you'd even call it good, just to make him happy. Oh, well, he mumbled in his sleep. Okay. Maybe, just maybe, you could ignore the chaotic kitchen. Thanks. I worked hard on that. You grinned. Was he somewhat awake? Or just dreaming really loudly? You bit your lower lip, smiling, just to suppress bursting out into violent laughter. For a moment you considered recording his ramblings to tease him later, but that would ruin this little moment. Smiling, you stood up, sneaking over to him. Slowly you lowered your head towards his ear and whispered, "I love you," before gently kissing his cheek.